If you ain't dumping, then don't pump it. I'm hitting Jermaine in Atlanta cause he owe me loot for that jump shit. Fuck astronauts, I rock it. And from now on, if you bite my shit when I see you, I'm in your pocket.
Alright, you kids get to bed, I get the storybook.
Treach pulls up on Jermaine Dupri about that 32-year debt. Chapter 1. The Bag Getting Low. Legendary rapper, Treach, from the 90s hip-hop powerhouse, Naughty by Nature, sat in his modestly lavish Hackensack, New Jersey home, sipping on a cold bottle of Heineken as he flipped through his bank statements, getting ready for the upcoming income tax season. The digits were there, sure, a solid 7 figures, but it wasn't the cushion he once had. Decades of hit songs, touring, and royalties had made him a household name, but it was the 2020s now, and money didn't stretch like it did back in the mid to late 90s. The endorsements and TV deals weren't rolling in the way they had during Naughty by Nature's prime, and it had been a minute since he acted in a movie. "What the hell happened?" Treach muttered, scanning the itemized list. "I'm just barely still a millionaire." His accountant, Denise, had warned him last tax season that things were getting tight, but seeing it on paper stung. Barely still a millionaire didn't have the same ring to it. Nostalgia didn't pay bills. Treach needed a plan, and fast. Chapter 2. The Debt List. For the next week, Treach dove into his mental niggas that owe me list, writing down names of people who had borrowed money from him over the years, but never paid it back. He thought of old friends, business partners, even random acquaintances who'd borrowed from him over the decades. By the time he was done, the list was 21 names deep. "It's time for some old school Suge Knight shit," he said, slamming the notebook shut, referencing all of the times the former Death Row Records founder had confronted people for money he said they owed him. Names like Vanilla Ice and Akon popped up in Treach's mind. The first stop was an old crew member from the Naughty by Nature days. That meeting, however, ended in a sob story about divorce, child support, and a repossessed Tesla. "Sorry, Treach," the man said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Wish I could help you, bro, but I'm ass out." Others on the list didn't fare much better. Some were unemployed, some couldn't even be found, and a few were, unfortunately, no longer alive. After a month of shaking down anyone he could track, Treach had collected a measly $1,000, hardly worth the effort. That's when he saw the final name on the list, Jermaine Dupri. Chapter 3. The Flashback. Iconic hip-hop music producer Jermaine Dupri was a name Treach hadn't thought about in years, but the memories came flooding back like it was yesterday. Back in 1991, Treach and Naughty by Nature had risen to stardom with their hit rap song called OPP. The new rapper had been grinding, writing rhymes like his life depended on it, as they prepared to stay at the top with more hit songs. One night at an industry party, Treach spit some lyrics that had everyone's heads nodding, including then relatively unknown hip-hop producer Jermaine Dupri. The following year, he heard those same lines on a song that JD produced for his kiddie rap group, Criss Cross, called Jump. Treach was insanely furious, realizing that the industry was cutthroat, and he vowed to get JD back when he ran into him. Now, though, 32 years later with his funds dwindling, Treach was done letting things slide. "JD still owes me for that," Treach muttered, grabbing his phone. Chapter 4. Planning the Confrontation. Treach and his crew, 5 loyal Jersey goons who'd been with him since the early days, started stalking JD's Instagram account. It didn't take long to figure out where the producer would be. JD's posts were filled with flyers for his upcoming birthday bash at the Pink Pony, a gentleman's club on Atlanta's north side. "That's our shot," Treach said, showing the post to his crew. The vindictive MC and his crew booked a flight from Jersey to the a day before the party, then rented a Sprinter van from Enterprise Car Rental, which surprisingly had New Jersey license plates after the previous renter drove it from Teaneck to Atlanta on a one-way rental. Chapter 5. The grab. The next day, on the night of JD's party, the crew parked their van in the lot of a closed-down Zaxby's chicken restaurant across the street from the strip club. The club's parking lot was packed with luxury cars, Beamers, Range Rovers, and the occasional Cybertruck. They didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, JD rolled up in a sleek black Benz S600 Maybach. Treach watched him step out, dressed to impress in a designer suit, gold chains glinting under the streetlights. "There you go right there," Treach said. "Let's move." The middle-aged men moved quickly and quietly, catching JD off guard as he walked toward the club's rear entrance. "Hey, JD," Treach said, stepping out of the shadows. JD turned, his face breaking into a smile. "What's up, boy?" The smile faded when Treach's crew surrounded him. "We need to talk," Treach said, his tone low and menacing. Before JD could react, they grabbed him, hustling him into the van. The club's bouncers were too far away to notice, and the noise of the party drowned out any commotion. Chapter 6. The Shakedown. The van sped through the streets of Atlanta, heading toward an abandoned industrial area on the city's outskirts. JD sat in the front row of seats, sandwiched in by two 6-footers, visibly shaken but trying to keep his composure. "What's this about, Treach?" he asked, looking at Treach. "Nigga, you still owe me," Treach said simply. JD frowned. "Owe you? For what?" "You stole my shit back in 1991. You thought I forgot?" JD's eyes widened as the memory clicked. "Treach, come on, man. That was decades ago. We was all just trying to make it back then." "Yeah, and I made it because I put in the work," Treach snapped. "You made it by taking what wasn't yours." Chapter 7. The standoff. Treach's crew pulled JD out of the van and shoved him against the wall of a crumbling warehouse. The sound of distant MARTA trains echoed through the night. "Here's how this is gonna go," Treach said, stepping closer. "You're gonna pay me what you owe me, plus interest. I figure 30 years of royalties adds up to a nice round number." JD shook his head. "Bruh, I don't have that kind of money no mo. I broke up with Janet damn near 16 years ago, and I ain't have a hit record in 20. Treach smirked. "You Jermaine Dupri. You can get a bag from somewhere." Chapter 8. Negotiations. The tension hung thick in the air as JD pleaded his case. He offered to write Treach a check for what he had, but Treach wasn't having it. "I want cash," he said. After hours of back and forth, JD finally agreed to cash app Treach $100,000 by the next morning. "That's all I can do right now," he said. Treach shook his head disappointingly because he really didn't want to do JD in the worst way, so he took heed to his good side when it suggested that he use the producer to work on the new solo album he was working on, free of charge, of course. JD reluctantly agreed. Treach's crew released him, warning that if he didn't show up for Treach's first studio session, they'd be back. JD stumbled to the nearest gas station to call for a ride, shaken but relieved to be alive. Chapter 9. A lesson learned. The next morning, the 100 bands hit Treach's account. It wasn't the massive payday he'd hoped for, but it was something. Sitting in a diner with his crew, Treach reflected on the past month. "Sometimes you gotta remind people who you are," he said, sipping his coffee. "But this ain't the life I want anymore." As he looked out the window at the rising Atlanta sun, Treach went over some verses for his upcoming solo album, titled Naughty Never Nice. Jermaine Dupri produced the entire album, doing some of his best work in decades, which surprisingly resulted in the aging hip-hop OGs receiving a Grammy the following February.